Now tell me, what is better than a 4 litre naturally aspirated V8 in a BMW M3? Well, there isn't much, but how about this? A 4 litre BMW V8 with a supercharger on it. Surely it can't get much better than that, and that is exactly what we're going to do in this video. We're going to go from a completely naturally aspirated car and follow 156 steps to turn this into a supercharged BMW E92 M3. Now I'm pretty sure this is something that every E92 M3 owner at some point has considered doing, but I can understand why you might be put off. It's a lot of work, a lot of money, and quite a lot of stress. And it's definitely not as simple as just bolting on a supercharger. We have lots of other bits which need to go with it, like trumpets, we've got new fuel injectors, and plenty of pipe work as well. So the kit that I've bought is from ESS Tuning, it's the V3 kit, and, well, have a look at this. This is a complete fitting guide for that kit, and, well, it's long, really long, that long. So I suppose we have no time to waste in turning this into a boosted BMW M3. So let's start off with step 1. And that starts in the boot because we've got to disconnect the battery. Done. We're officially 156th of the way there. So then by the looks of it, the following steps are doing exactly what we started with last week when we were doing the rocker covers. So that means pulling off all the scuttle panel and everything else around there. So let's get that smashed out. Now, if you guys have watched the previous videos, you've seen us do all of this already. So let's get right through the boring bits and get straight to where it gets interesting. Now, with the scuttle removed, I can take out the ECU because we're going to need to get this flashed to accommodate the new injectors and the extra air that this engine's going to be getting. So with the cover removed, we can now unplug the ECU and then fight it past all of the wires to get it out of the car. And we are cooking with gas. We're currently on step 29 and we're about to where we were in the last video.
Yeah, all fun and games now, isn't it?
I don't know why we put it all back together, but we didn't know we were going to be doing this. I just had that opportunity, I had to grab it. So anyway, now next thing to come off is the vacuum lines that go on, is it vacuum? Breather, whatever they are, the pipes which go into the plenum.
Vacuum breather pipes, and then we need to disconnect the Jubilee clips off the top of the ITV.
Yeah, okay. Next thing that's going to come off then is the plenum, and then we are exactly back where we started. Now the reason why we're back here is because I wasn't sure I was going to be doing this. I wanted to make sure the car was as good as it could be in its naturally aspirated form, but then, well, Ethan tempted me. I said in the first video he's got everything I'm ever going to need for this car, and he had a supercharger kit for it. I knew that you guys would love watching us do it, and it was worth the risk and the gamble. And if you are going to enjoy seeing this supercharged, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below because it's cost me a lot of money. Right, step 29, plenum off. Let's go! So we can undo the Jubilees on the plenum, all 8 of them that go onto the throttle bodies. And then after we've disconnected the final pipe, we can pop that off. Then it's out with the fan, so we can unplug that and then pull that out. And then we've just got to unbolt the oil cooler but not got to remove it. Then next up we've got the belts to come off, and the ideal thing to do here is take note of how they route because it can be quite easy to forget them.
Goes like round.
Damn. Artiste. So now we've made note of how the belts go around the pulleys. We can remove those by doing off the tensioner and then removing the belt. The reason why we've got to do this is because we need a new longer belt on the car because we're going to have some extra pulleys for the belt to go round, to go onto the tensioners and also the supercharger pulley too. So now we've got the first aftermarket part to go on. Now this seems like a pretty well designed kit, and the benefit of that,
it's an easy installation.
Exactly that, Ethan, which means that it should...
It's idiot proof basically.
No, please, no. Do not say that. Let's not jinx actually, no. This is a very complicated install, yeah, and it will be hard all the way through. I don't want any presuming here. We will check back in a minute. So we can now bolt up the heat exchanger. Alright! Water cooler fitted. That cools the supercharger and also steals my socket and the other part of my socket. Let's see what's next on the list of things to do.
Have fun there, lad, Jack.
No.
Harder.
It's jammed.
Use them legs.
And the next thing to come off is the fuel rail. So there's 2 bolts in each side. So once we've got those removed and also got the fuel lines disconnected, we can pop those off. We also need to modify this pipe which goes into the plenum because we need to get rid of this quick release fitting on the end to change it for like a Jubilee joined connector piece. So this took us a lot longer than what I'd care to admit. This clip was really hard to get off, but with a bit of determination and trying a few tools, we got there in the end.
Right, fuel rails off, and we do have some new ones on fuel rails ready to go, so we haven't got to mess about. We can just swap the fuel rails straight in, but we're going to run off first and have those tested to make sure they're 100%. Because, well, the last thing we want is injectors that ain't 100, you get me? Because the last thing we want is an injector to fail, so we want to make sure they're absolutely top tier. So, yeah, we're going to run off now and get those sorted. But you might be thinking I'm a bit stupid for doing this anyway at this point, this whole job. Because in the last video, the engine was misfiring and we couldn't read the OBD, which could have been an indicator that the ECU was failing. Luckily it wasn't, and it wasn't that exciting to fix, so I didn't even film it, but essentially I think one of the pins in the OBD port is playing a bit funny, so no matter which OBD reader I use, if I push it in and just pull it out the tiniest bit, it reads it absolutely fine. That then told me that cylinder 4 was the problem area, and I found that we just didn't plug in a coil pack properly.
It was me, wasn't it?
It might have been, but it's alright. Teamwork makes the dream work, brother. So that fixed that problem. It was running sweet as a nut, and we can crack on with this now. Happy days, which is good. So
yeah,
now it's time to get the bad boys tested, isn't it?
Yeah, man.
Oh, let's go!
Make sure they're squirting properly.
And we're back, and we have our freshly tested and refurbished, well, cleaned injectors. They've fitted new O-rings, new mesh buckets in there, and checked them all, and they're all hunky-dory. So now they can go back into the fuel rail can go back into the car, and then we can deliver the car more fuel, which it's going to need for the extra air that it's going to get when it's boosted.
So armed with Ethan's special pot of Vaseline, I can lubricate the O-rings ever so slightly and push these new injectors into the fuel rails. And once they're pushed into place, there's just a little retaining clip which holds them on there permanently. And now that they're fully assembled back on the fuel rails, we can fit the fuel rail back to the car. Once in place, we can get all 8 injectors plugged in, and then we have to do a slight modification to some of the wiring underneath the plenum to allow a little bit more travel on one of the plugs so we can still plug it in, which was pretty simple to do because we only had to swap the location of one of the wires just to give ourselves that extra little bit of jiggle room that we need.
Right, progress is looking good. There is one thing which we've got to do down here, which is on this water pipe which runs along the chassis leg, and that is drill a new hole just about there, just so the pipe can sit a little bit lower, which should give us some more clearance. So I've just bent the bracket up, gonna drill it, and I'll bend it back down because otherwise I'd never get to it. Let's hope I don't slip and then put a hole in this pipe.
Yeah, let's hope you don't do that. You got it, bro.
I'd call that nice work. Pew pew. So now we're getting ready to fit the exciting bit up, which is the supercharger itself, the bit which makes the boost, the bit which makes the power. So now I've got to just take these 10mm bolts out the front of the casing. Is that the right word? Casing? Front case? Front,
yeah.
This? Yeah? Let's call it that anyway. And yeah, something like that anyway.
Or up ahead.
We've got to take these bolts out anyway. And then, I'm not really sure why. I'd love to tell you why. Don't really know.
Just to mount the charger on, isn't it?
But yeah, then we're going to look at bolting that supercharger onto the car and we can see how it's going to look. But there's still quite a lot more to do after that, unfortunately. As much as I'd like to say it's done, it ain't. And here we go. Here is the supercharger. And this is what's going to make us make power. It works very similarly to a turbo.
Because on a turbo setup car, it uses the exhaust gas to spin the turbine wheel, which then goes along a shaft to the intake side of the turbo, and then that in turn spins the compressor side, which sucks in more air and then tells the engine, which we need more fuel to match, therefore creating a bigger bang and more power. But on a supercharged setup, the exhaust gas does absolutely nothing, and the crank pulley spins a belt which goes onto the supercharger, and in turn then sucks in more air and then adds more fuel to create the bigger bang aka more power.
It's instantly spooling anyway, so.
Is that because it's always spinning at the same speed?
Spinning at the same time as the engine because it's run off the belt that's driven.
He's a clever man.
So there's no lag.
There is no lag, but it does sap a bit of engine power.
But then it makes up for it.
It does make up for it, yeah, but because it's using the drive of the engine to drive it, it saps a bit of the power, then it boosts the power by more than that, but it makes it more inefficient by doing so.
It's a booster.
Yeah, but who cares, because that's going to look sick. And I'm looking forward to hearing how this sounds actually, because you'd expect it to sound similar to a turbo with how similar it looks on the intake side, but I know for a fact it ain't, and I can't wait to hear it, but let's go.
So now we can drop the supercharger into its location, and those 4 bolts which I just removed, which I didn't know why we had to do that, are one of the parts which secure it to the engine. Along with that, there's also a big thick bolt which goes through the alternator bracket as well. Just to make things a little bit easier to fit, we ended up removing one of the main coolant pipes from the radiator to the engine, but that gave us loads of room then in order to bolt this up. Now we're a bit concerned with how this was positioned and if it was going to actually touch the body of the car when the engine moves, but once we got all of the bolts in, it hugged it nice and tight to the block, and we've got no worries about that now. It should be good.
It's Ethan's fault if this car blows up.
No, don't say that.
Because he said it's a really good idea, so it's his fault.
Don't say that.
That just looks absolutely carnage, don't it? That I'm buzzing with that. Woo, 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 woo. I can't wait to hear this run now. Hopefully it does. But while we're here, new bolt for the rocker cover which we did in the last video, which snapped. So we managed to get the old one out in the last video, just plied it out from the back so I can pop the new one in. And this time it's not getting torqued to 10 Newton meters. We've had to take off everything we've done because we forgot to put the intake pipe on and it doesn't fit without, well, I think it's got to go on first, and
Yeah, man.
it looks tight. So now it's in place, now we can put it all back together. Nice. Hey! Let's skip to when it is all back together.
Yeah.
And now we can fit on the 2 tensioner pulleys for the supercharger. These have been collected a little bit of rust from being sat around for a while, but we'll get that cleaned up very easily. And now we can start fitting up that new longer belt. So with the supercharger belt fitted, we can also fit the other auxiliary belt. And then at this point we were scratching our heads a tiny bit because we got a little bit stuck with some slightly vague instructions and everything started to get a little bit complicated. And that's because the instructions weren't so clear at this point on what exactly we had to do for the water pump for the heat exchanger, which helps cool down the plenum and keeps the charge air as cold as possible. So we went back to what we knew best and we started winging it, trying out a few different things to see exactly what worked and what didn't, and seeing if we could make some progress that way. But after we took a step back and had a bit of a breather and realised how far we'd come already on something that neither of us had done before, we think we managed to get it sussed, and we think we figured out exactly what we needed to do so we could start fitting up this new water pump and connecting up the hoses from that to the heat exchanger and also from there to the plenum as well. So with everything bolted up there on the brackets for that and also the pipe work, we can start looking at the electrics. So it runs nicely to an earth on one of the shock towers. So all we had to do here was take the nut off, pop the earth on and refit that nut, and then that loom was earth. But for the positive, we had to find a specific wire in the loom and then splice off that. So once we'd found that wire, we could strip back to the core, and then using a solder connector, we put both ends of the wire in and also the new wire as well, which is leading to the water pump, and then heated this up, which melts the solder inside and insulates it, and then we're good to go there as well. So with everything fastened up down the front of the engine, we can start putting the fan in, although we had to do some faffing about with the pipe work for the heat exchanger to make sure that was all nice and clear. We did get that in pretty swiftly.
And we're getting through it. We've got the fan back in, all the belts are on, all of the, what's the word for it? The heat exchanger.
Yes.
And water pump in. The wiring is done for that. We're still waiting on the plenum. Hopefully it should be done this afternoon, so when that's back on we can get all of these pipes hooked up to it, back onto the ITBs, and we're getting there. Now, like I mentioned earlier in the video, this is a second-hand unit, so we want to make sure it's the best it can be. So we're going to service the supercharger quick, which is relatively easy to do supposedly. Just drop the oil out of it, put some fresh oil in it, and it should be good to go. So we're going to do that now, and then we really are just waiting for that plenum, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a problem.
Come on.
Supercharger service, let's go.
You watch this. Crack.
Big snap.
Don't say that.
So this is the drain pipe from the supercharger, so we just have to crack the nut out at the end of this, which will allow all of the supercharger oil to come out.
So that is the precious supercharger oil. And here is the fresh stuff. This was £20 for, I don't even know how big it is, but this is enough anyway to do the supercharger, so that's absolutely fine. We want to make sure it's in the best health, and this is going to be how we do that, Heath.
Yeah, man. Get it in.
Get her in.
So using an Allen key, we can take out the fill plug, and then with that took out, we can then start filling up our pump with the supercharger oil. We found this was the best way we thought to do it anyway, and with that put in, we also learned that you're best to take out the dipstick to allow some of the air to pass out without it overflowing out the top. So we will learn from our mistakes, I guess.
So, don't want to repeat myself, but we are still waiting for that plenum, so we're looking for some other bits to kill some time while we do that. And we've got some headlights, which you'll never guess where they came from. So, you can put these in for now. We've got the new surrounds in, and hopefully they should just bolt up.
Get tickled by the mic.
And it's here. We've now finally got the plenum. It's fresh from paint, so it's still very soft and not been sanded or polished or anything like that, so it's going to look, but it needs a sand and polish. But apart from that, we're ready to rock. So we're going to be as careful with it to not put any fingerprints in as possible. We've got the, is it a blow-off valve?
I think it's a blow-off.
Or something along that sort of line anyway, so... yeah,
you can't do as YouTube,
we don't know much about these, but anyway, that's going on. And then we're just going to plumb it up and put it on top of the engine. Now that replaces the original plenum and also obviously now the airbox and all those bits, so they are no longer needed.
They're for sale, so get at him.
And I've also got a new external air temperature sensor which is going to turn off the last fault on the engine, hopefully.
But who knows, we may have caused some more faults by fitting this supercharger kit, but I guess we'll find out at the end. But now we've got this new plenum painted, we can fit up the trumpets to the bottom of it, as well as the barbed fittings, so we can fit the pipework for the heat exchanger to there as well. And now for the big moment, we can fit that freshly painted plenum to the engine. And this is one of the, apart from the supercharger itself, the biggest differences in the aesthetic changes to the engine bay. So all we had to do was fasten up all of the cooling lines that go into it, and then once they were on and also the breathers were fitted, we could then start pushing it down into the ITBs and doing up those jubilees that go onto there. But now everything is getting fastened up there. The M3 engine bay is looking mean, but we're not quite done yet, and that's because we need some fluids. We need to top up the coolant for the car, but also the separate coolant reservoir with the same coolant for the supercharger.
Right, ECU. We were originally going to try and get this flashed while it was off the car, but after speaking to a specialist, they said it will idle fine, just don't rev it up too much and don't go and gun it down the road. Wait until it's tuned. So we're going to put the ECU on so it can run and move, but then trailer it to be tuned. So this can go back in for now, and then I think we're going to try and start it.
So with the ECU back in, we can now go back to the first step and reconnect the battery, and that is everything done.
Well, there we have it. One ESS supercharger installed on an E92 M3, and it was really easy.
Yeah, really easy.
So now there's only one thing to do, and that is start her up. Are you a little bit nervous?
No. I actually ain't that nervous, to be fair.
I'm a little bit.
It is what it is. This is on its own system, innit? So we know where the leaks are going to come from if they're going to be there. Don't be nervous.
Let's find out. Bless you. Bless you. Here we go, Ethan.
Go on.
There's nothing I can really do to prime it, is there? I've just got to go for it.
Yeah, just got to go for it.
Oh, I'm kind of scared. Okay, I'm going to turn you around so you can see the dash.
3, 2, 1, ignition.
1 sec.
No ignition.
Now. She's cranking, she's cranking. She's running! You alright?
Hear it. That noise is back, Chris.
We spent all that time getting rid of the supercharger noise to add it back. Ethan poured it well. Nice pour there, mate.
It's only a little bit.
That stinks. She seems alright though.
Yeah? I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, she starts, so coming off cold start. Sounds alright to me.
Yeah.
All we haven't done.
What?
Celebrated. High five. It's nice.
Big success. Let's turn that off.
Yes, and let's check the level of the supercharged oil now. I'm glad it starts, I'll tell you that, and it doesn't sound too scary. Yeah, the instructions said we need to check the supercharger oil after starting it, so we're going to do that right now.
And then I'm going to go home because I need to go.
I'm definitely not going to go out and drive this on a standard map.
No, do not do that. Do not do that. And you've got a headlight. You've got a headlight.
No, that one's alright, that one's alright.
Drift mode.
Private land. Right, it's now the next day, and I've got the M3 outside because there's something waiting inside the garage which I'll show you in a little bit. But we want to check the car now because, well, not everything is right, let me tell you that, and it's not what we expected. But first thing we want to do is scan the car for fault codes, and like I said in the last video, I was having some issues reading all of the codes on this car, but it turned out it's just a slightly faulty OBD connector on the car. So key in ignition, ignition on, and we can take our OBD11 device and pop it straight into the car's OBD2 port. Then what we can do is fire up the OBD11 app, and you can see straight away it's picked up that my car is a BMW M3, and now it's going to read through all of the control units to check all of the modules to see what faults we've got stored. And with a click of the button we can scan all of those, and thankfully this time we've got 0 fault codes on the engine because now we've plugged in the external temperature sensor and also plugged in that coil pack properly. The engine is running right. But OBD11 can do so much more than just that. Take for example my Audi R8, which we've just been to Autosport International in, and it was great meeting some of you guys there. But on this, what we can do is we've got loads of coding functionalities as well, because on VAG Group cars and BMWs from F Series to I Series, there's loads of one-touch applications you can activate. Now because safety is key and also your car is your pride and joy, we can set this so it's a little bit harder to steal by making it automatically lock when you go over 15 kilometers an hour. But OBD11 has loads of functionalities for loads of cars and also has basic diagnostics for every vehicle fitted with an OBD2 port, so to grab yourself one, make sure to use the link in the description and discount code SLIX to save yourself some money. But anyway, let's get back to the M3 because there's something which didn't go so well. And you might be thinking, what's that? Because we've heard it run and it sounded sweet, and yeah, you're right, well, it did. But when we started it to move it out of the garage after the show on Sunday, to pull it round the side, to make room for the X3M, which has just got back and we're just about to start filming on, it didn't sound good. Let me show you. So I'll just fire her up again quick. Okay, well let me tell you, last time it didn't sound like this either. That's also not good. Well, I'm a bit gutted about that. It's running very lumpy and isn't happy at all. And at the moment I'm not sure 100% what that could be, so I'm going to have to do some more investigating on that. But what I was going to say was that when we started it yesterday, it started fine, wasn't running lumpy at all, but we could hear a knocking coming from the engine, which is slightly worrying. And it didn't sound like it was coming from inside the engine after some investigation. It sounded like it was actually coming from the power steering pulley, so we're going to have to do some digging into what's happened there. But you guys heard it run perfectly the first time, as did we, and it's just got worse every time I've started it since then, which is slightly worrying, so there's definitely some more work to do here. Well, I wanted to finish this video on a really positive note about how me and Ethan, who aren't trained mechanics in any way, shape or form, have managed something pretty mega, and we had, but well, it's all gone downhill since then, so we've got a lot more work to do, I guess. Bit sad really, but for now we're gonna have to leave it there. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and I'll catch you next time.